82,000 pounds of American bombs exploded in Beirut while they were seeking to destroy a mountain. And the shot was heard all over the world. The clocks stopped, the tears fell, the mourning began, but the guns kept on blazing. Both the American guns in the hands of Netanyahu's Air Force and the guns of the resistance. Indeed, there has not been a moment's peace for the people of Lebanon or for the people of Netanyahu's settler state ever since the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the Secretary General of Hezbollah, the leading force in the Lebanese resistance. Sayyid Hassan was no ordinary leader. Maybe once in 100 years or more, such a leader will come along. He transformed the Lebanese resistance from a few young men with Kalashnikovs to an army of 100,000 men, complete with all the aerial ordnance that would be required to make life unlivable for the whole population of the settler state. And if, as is widely trailed, Netanyahu intends a repeat of 2006 and a ground invasion of the sacred soil of the Lebanon, he's going to find out that Hezbollah has fighters on the ground just as proficient as the fighters in the air. The Lebanese population, as always, just as the population in the Gaza Strip, women, children, men who are not combatants are being slain in massive numbers. In fact, day for day, the slaughter of the Lebanese civilians, of all kinds, by the way, Shiites, Sunnis, Christians, including towns, villages where Jesus walked, are extraordinarily high, and the killing fields have moved from Gaza through the West Bank into Lebanon. And the Jerusalem Post gave the game away. They've deleted it now, but for 3 days the story was there on the portals of the Jerusalem Post. Apparently, God promised Lebanon to the Israelis just as he had promised Palestine. That was removed because it rather gives the game away. The project of a greater Israel, beloved of the Likudniks, the two blue lines on the flag of what they call Israel, constitute from the river Nile to the river Euphrates, and now it turns out they want at least part of Lebanon as well. This kind of acquisition of other people's territory by force is, of course, a crime under international law, but it's a crime the Israelis have been getting away with for more than 75 years. And the so-called institutions of the so-called international community have turned out to be nothing but eunuchs. In fact, the president of Iran just said the other day that they had lied to Iran about their intention of forcing a ceasefire in Gaza. And when they asked Iran to hold back their retaliation, which is legally entitled retaliation, that they said they would impose a ceasefire in Gaza, and according to the president of Iran, they lied. Well, I could have told him that. I've been studying the European Union, the United States, Great Britain, and the so-called international community, who represent, in fact, 13% of all humanity. I could have told the president of Iran not to believe a word that they said. And so it has turned out to be. The people of Lebanon have come together. In the past, that was not always so. But Christian figures like General Aoun, like Suleiman Frangieh, like even the formerly Phalangist Catholic Christian Lebanese parties have said that if a hair is harmed on the head of any Lebanese, that the Lebanese people will come together as one to defend them. And the national unity which has broken out in Lebanon, is the first and best answer to Netanyahu's fiendish plans. The resistance will go on. Everybody loses their father, and it's painful, but their father is still with them. His memories, his ideas, his inspiration, his teachings, his line will continue. And so it will be true of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. He was no ordinary leader, but he was a man, and all men must pass. God is the real leader of the Hezbollah and other organizations in other parts of the axis of resistance. They believe that they are doing God's work. They believe that they are holy warriors, and they will not be dissuaded from the path to liberate Jerusalem by the heavy blows which Hezbollah undoubtedly suffered over the last few days. Those heavy blows have, they say, decapitated the Hezbollah, but I think they're about to find out different. They ain't seen nothing yet. After the Nasrallah assassination, what's next? You've come to the right place. Have it out with Galloway to find out. Sayyid Hussain Makke holds a BA in journalism and an MA in religions and global politics. He's been a student of the Islamic sciences since 2012 at the seminary in Lebanon, and he joins us now. Sayyid Hussain, thanks for joining us. Very heavy blows have been absorbed by the Lebanese people, by the Lebanese resistance, but the struggle continues, does it not?
Thank you for having me, George. And yes, of course, the struggle does continue. And for the place in which the Lebanese people come from, especially the ethos of the Lebanese resistance, they are not a people that are easily defeated. They understand their heritage, most of all, their heritage that comes from their belief in Imam al-Hussein. Imam al-Hussein is the third Shi'i Imam, and he is the inspiration which created Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah. And that is still alive. Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah is an individual, an amazing individual, but that light remains shining bright. And so everyone looks towards the lessons they have from Imam al-Hussein, which are, when one is posed between two choices, he has to face death or humiliation, he will always go towards death first, because we say, hayhat minna dhillah. We do not accept humiliation. So all these people in Lebanon right now, although these are heavy blows, they understand that from 2006 and from 2000 and from before that, they have experienced this before. This doesn't mean that the war is over. More destruction and more killing does not mean that Israel is winning. Actually, they haven't accomplished any of their goals so far in 12 months, neither in Gaza or in Lebanon.
The war in Gaza now, as you rightly say, almost 1 year on, and even this day, a resistance strike near Khan Yunis took many Israeli casualties. The struggle of the Israeli armed forces in Gaza does not portend an easy time for them were they to go ahead with a ground invasion of Lebanon, does it?
No, you see, the Israeli military relies a lot on its technology. When it comes to their individuals, these people, they like comfort. The way that they are defeated is when you actually have to face them man to man. These people do not wish to sacrifice their lives for anything. They want this world. And they are up against people who believe in the afterlife, just like we believe that we're talking to each other right now. And they know they're on the side of truth. I think the whole world, this is even about Islam. This is humanity. The whole world knows that the side of justice is to be against the killers of children who have killed over 40,000 people in Palestine up till now, and in the last week have killed over 1,600 Lebanese, injuring 8,000 Lebanese, and displacing 1 million Lebanese. For what? For what?
The bombs which killed Sayyid Hassan and his noble bodyguards, and indeed a visitor from the Iranian IRGC, were American bombs. The aeroplanes which fired them were American aeroplanes. It's impossible to believe, as Biden-Harris seek to fool us into believing, that the Americans were not involved in this murder. The order was given from the city of New York and given from the building of the United Nations, no less. This is an American-Israeli attack on Lebanon, is it not?
If there's one thing that Sayyid Hassan taught his people and his followers, it's that Israel receives everything from America. America ultimately is the big boss. It's not complicit in the genocide of the Palestinians, and it's not complicit in what's happening in America, in Lebanon, Afwan. It is a direct actor. Actually, they just gave an approved $8.7 billion worth of weaponry to Israel, and those 85 Buster bunker bombs weighing 2,000 to 4,000 pounds each were from America, made in America. Killing, by the way, killing hundreds of civilians, leveling 6 buildings at the same time. And when Harris or Biden released their statement, they don't have one word of condemnation against the killing of children, even though it is so similar to what happened in 9/11, destroying towers with civilians in it, which, by the way, the man they call a terrorist, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, condemned. He condemned the tactics of bin Laden. He fought against Al-Qaeda in Syria. He fought against ISIS in Syria. He condemned what happened on 9/11. This very same man that they call a terrorist because they want him to be a terrorist is a man that was the only one standing up to the Israeli powers as he tried to implement what the UN resolutions were calling for anyway, and what most of the international community was calling for anyway. He was the only one that was actually willing to go all the way, though. And the Israeli officials have said this. They admitted that the reason they decided to kill him was because he would not take a side deal without the Palestinians. Any ceasefire deal for Lebanon, he said, has to involve Gaza. They admit this. So they're not killing a terrorist. They're killing the man who wanted peace. They're killing the man who wanted the UN resolutions to stand. He just had the teeth for it. He was the one who tried to implement that. And they won't say the true narrative. They'll constantly try to label him as the terrorist. People have been calling for this ceasefire all year in Gaza. Hundreds and thousands of people have marched, millions of people all around the world, and now we're still in the same place talking about the same thing happening in another country. So if we're going to rely on the powers that be, we're going to see a lot of people get genocided. There had to be someone who is willing to stand up to them, and now he gave his blood for it.
The will and testament of Sayyid Hassan has now been published. In it, he asked the faithful people to repose their trust and their faith in Ayatollah Khamenei, the leader of the Islamic Revolution in Iran. Will that will be entirely observed by the people, or is there a case for saying that if Iran had responded, as they said they would, to the murder of Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, then Sayyid Hassan might still be alive, because Israel would have known what they were potentially up against? You must be aware of that line of thinking out there amongst the people.
Yes, of course I am. First of all, I respect the intelligence of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, the same intelligence which impressed legendary intellectuals like Noam Chomsky and Edward Said when they met him, as is written in their memoirs. I respect his intelligence. He's not a sheep. And he understood the idea of the resistance axis more than anyone. And he understood the role of Lebanon as the neighboring country to Israel and the differing role that it has to Iran. But there would be no, I wouldn't say no resistance, but the power of the resistance would be very different of the whole region if it wasn't for Iran and all that Iran sacrificed and all that Iran has had to endure in terms of sanctions because of its support of the oppressed and those who resist. Now, when it comes to Sayyid Khamenei, that's a whole different issue because that's beyond Iran. Now we're talking about something where religion is involved, not only politics, and where Sayyid Hassan was always, it was no secret, he was very loyal to Sayyid Khamenei. And the ones who follow Sayyid Hassan, they don't follow a normal leader. And George, you know this, most of the world probably don't know this. Sayyid Hassan was not a normal leader. He's not a leader in it for himself. This man didn't enjoy anything from this world. This man gave his son for what he believed in. This man couldn't see the sun itself for many weeks and months. No one knew where he was. This man barely made any money. He was not in it for himself. He was in it because he truly believed in the path of God. He had to stand up against injustice and he had to sacrifice everything in his way. And he saw himself, and he constantly said this, when he was named Man of the Year about 15 years ago, when he was in Iran, he made sure to kiss the hand of Sayyid Khamenei in front of everyone because he said, you named me Man of the Year, but I wanted to show that I am a loyal soldier of Sayyid Khamenei. He believes in this path of Wilayatul Faqih. And so those who have been raised by Sayyid Hassan, that's why he's not a normal leader. He raised people. He grew up in front of them and they grew up with him and they went to war together. These people, they are going to be loyal to the 30 or 40 years of education that he has given them that's still there, that people need to study and realize what it was that he taught them. I believe that, yes, his loyal followers will be loyal to Sayyid Khamenei because they never differentiated between the both of them. This was beyond being Lebanese or Iranian or Yemeni or Iraqi. This was about going towards what is right. And that's why you'll find in Lebanon, women who are Christian, men who are Sunni, Druze, whoever it is, they are all weeping for the martyrdom of Sayyid Hassan. Of course, there are always going to be people that are talking about him being someone that they don't like or whatever he did or sectarianism. These are all Zionist talking points for sectarianism or trying to dissow the unity between the factions which are against the colonial and imperial powers. This is the easiest and oldest trick in the book.
The awesome silence of the Arab states has never been more starkly displayed than this. Most of them have not even condemned the Israeli attack, the assassination, the slaughter of many hundreds of Lebanese people of all sects and faiths, as you say. Lebanon is a member of the Arab League. Who knew the Arabs had a league? It's a fourth division conference league, if you remember your football from your time in London. But what can we expect from the Arab masses who, from Marrakesh to Bahrain, overwhelmingly feel the same way as you do, as I do, about the crimes of Netanyahu?
Ultimately, George, unfortunately, I don't believe that the Arab states will make much of a difference. Just like in the last year, we've seen they haven't made much of a difference. It's very sad that we're still here, actually. I remember all the talking shows that I was watching about a year ago, right in the beginning of the genocide in Gaza, and the talking points are still the same now. It's just happening in Lebanon. I don't think the Arab states are going to have much of an effect because at the end of the day, they paddle around for what America wants and what Israel wants. They're not going to stand in their way. The only ones willing to hold them accountable are ones who are actually prepared to defend themselves, even if it requires force, which is a natural conclusion that any people would make. They would defend themselves. Just like everyone says Israel apparently has a right to defend itself, even though 82% of the attacks between Lebanon and Israel in the last year, since October 7th, has come from Israel. Even though since 2007, Israel has broken 35,000 times the UN resolution of 1701. So Israel is doing all of this and they haven't stopped it in the last 15, 20, 30 years, and they won't do anything about it now. The only way I believe we can help these people. Of course, it needs pressure as much as we can from the outside, but ultimately it's going to rely on the indigenous people to protect and defend themselves and exhaust the Zionist entity until it realizes that it's self-destructing. And that's what it's doing right now. More killing and more destruction does not mean it's winning. To win a war is to achieve objectives of war, and they haven't been able to achieve any of these objectives of war.
Now, the shoe that has not dropped is the Iranian shoe. When it drops, if it drops, it will be with a heavy thud. Do you still expect that shoe to drop? Do you expect it to be a significant game-changing moment? Or do you think that the current stasis will continue vis-a-vis the now serial crimes that Israel has committed against Iran? The assassination of Hania, the wounding of the Iranian ambassador in Lebanon, the killing of the IRGC deputy commander. I mean, Iran now has a lot of entirely lawful reasons for retaliation. Are they going to take that offer?
First of all, like I said, I respect the intelligence of Sayyid Hassan. I also respect the intelligence of Sayyid Khamenei. But because of this, I would say that to do so, to interfere right now, would be to suggest that the Lebanese resistance is on its final legs, which it isn't yet, which it just needs to readjust because of the damages that it has suffered in the last 2 weeks. But there's still a lot for it to give. Now, the war against Israel is mainly a war of attrition. It is in the benefit of those who resist Israel for the war to carry on longer, because that's how you defeat a superpower that is the most well-armed power and with the most intelligence perhaps in history. Israel prefers to finish things quickly and make decisive blows, but that's why it is never able to achieve its objectives. Right now, okay, you killed the faces of the resistance in Lebanon, but there's still all the masses that you don't know who they are, you don't know their faces, and they all want revenge. So this is going to be a very long war, and it is in the benefit of those who wish to see Israel lose for the war to carry on in a way that Israel realizes that it has to concede to a ceasefire without the terms that it has set. Now, if that means eventually Iran has to get involved, I don't see why it wouldn't eventually, but it benefits Iran more to be involved in a war of attrition rather than to get into a big blow war with Israel.
Sayyid Hussain, a remarkable interview. It will live long, I think. May God protect you. Thanks for joining us on Have It Out with Galloway. Let's go straight to the audience wall. It's a unique feature of this particular show that the audience get to appear in person on the show. Naim Malik in Germany is the first guest. Naim, what's on your mind?
Good afternoon in the group. It seems to me, watching all this thing going on, that Israel is taking one by one all the leaders and killing all these people. And we have been relying too much on Iran. I don't think Iran is going to do anything directly. It's only the local people who will have to keep on fighting. And I feel that greater Israelis on the way of a formation. What do you think?
Well, they would very much like to, but I don't think for one moment that they will successfully occupy even a part of Lebanon. Lebanon may be the Arab country I know best, in which I've spent the most time. It's where I entered the Arab and Muslim world through that portal of Lebanon. I know the Lebanese people, and I know that they are never going to allow a moment of peace for any foreign invader on their land. And so any idea that they're going to occupy Lebanon, even a part of Lebanon up to the Litani River, is entirely fanciful in my view. Ditto, if anyone, I see on social media people saying they're going to try and occupy Syria. I cannot think of any country in the whole world less likely successfully to be occupied than Syria. Notwithstanding the Syrian capacity, Syria is a 54-year ally of Russia, and Russia will never allow Israel to occupy Syria. So Greater Israel is what they would like, but whether they will achieve it is highly unlikely in my view. Tom Sullivan is a journalist in London. Tom, what do you want to say?
George, thank you for having me. As you know much better than I, Iran has restrained itself from developing nuclear technology not to put a target on its back, but at the same time, it's been cultivating the axis of resistance as a way to balance against Israel. With the assassination of Nasrallah and the attacks on Hezbollah as a group, how now can Iran, in your view, balance against Israel and, you know, push back to stop itself being attacked without taking steps like nuclear proliferation, which we jumped on as a reason to attack it? You know, I was saying something this morning, they've been talking about wanting to go to war with Iran for 20 years now. And I'm not saying Iran is perfect, but to me, it looks like they're in a kind of catch-22. They're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. How do you see them kind of getting out of this without taking all of us into a place where we don't want to be?
Well, a great question, Tom. I'm, of course, an opponent of nuclear weapons. I've been arrested and carried away by the police. I gave an interview to the BBC upside down while being carried by 4 police officers protesting about nuclear weapons. But we can't have a world where some people are allowed to have nuclear weapons and threaten others with them, while the potential victim of those nuclear weapons does not have the right to nuclear weapons. Now, I've said on this program before, of course, I don't speak for Iran. The Iranians might not like me saying so. But if I was the leader of Iran, I'd already have a nuclear weapon, because the United States, Britain, France, the enemies of Iran, all have nuclear weapons. And Israel has hundreds of nuclear weapons, never declared, secretly held, illegally built, never inspected by the IAEA or any international agency. Why should Israel be allowed to have nuclear weapons pointed at Iran, but Iran is not allowed to have nuclear weapons to defend itself? Wasn't that the whole thesis of those who believe in nuclear weapons? That they are mutually assured destruction, that they keep the peace? That's the talking points of the NATO talking heads. Well, if that was true for the NATO and Warsaw Pact standoff, presumably it's also true between Israel and Iran. Dr. Rehana Ali, in an old stamping ground of mine, Bradford. Doctor, what would you like to say?
Thank you, George. So a quick comment, first of all. So informative comments by your guest speaker. Now, he obviously mentioned that these attacks were, you know, via the United States and Israel. But I think there's a kind of important nuance there. That yes, the US absolutely is involved in this genocide or the Holocaust in Palestine, as I call it. But the US is also occupied. And I think this point is not often repeated because people fear being called anti-Semites. Let's be clear who Biden's cabinet are. Same applies to Starmer's. They have a dual loyalty to Israel. So we have a fifth column in actually various governments in the US, in the UK, and throughout Europe. So my question is actually that, you know, there's also this inversion of terrorism. So it's very clear, if it wasn't to people before, that the Israeli attacks on Lebanon through the pages, now this assassination of Sayyid Nasrallah, and if the claims are true that actually Nasrallah was willing to consider a ceasefire, they had promised that there would be no Iran would not respond if, for example, they did not respond to the killing of Ismail Haniyeh, then this means that basically Israel, I mean, it should have been obvious to them anyway, I think, that Israel's word, this Talmudic word, cannot be trusted. So why is it that when it's clear who the terrorists are, that, you know, there's been no attempts in the UK to prescribe, whether it would fail or not, because I think it's important to do, that it's Israel that's the terrorist entity? And actually, why is it that the resistance, which is perfectly legitimate and legal under international law, there's never been an attempt to deprescribe it? Because we know Priti Patel, when she prescribed Hamas in 2021, you know, Hamas had been around since 1987. And my second question is also linked in terms of these actions. That's one particular action that I think would help our support for Palestine, because they are basically criminalizing anyone who supports the resistance. My second question is, you know, I was at the London protest, you know, just under a fortnight ago, and not a single PSC speaker mentioned the most effective action. They said, you know, what should we keep doing? We should keep marching. Well, yes, that's to show dissent. But there is one important action, and that's the action of boycotts.
Well, I agree with that. Doctor, I'll have to cut you short because of the time. There's an awful lot of people want to get on. Let me deal with your last point first. Boycott is the most effective weapon. And the reason why the organization you mentioned, with which I have no connection, on whose platforms I do not speak, is that they are running scared of the false allegation that by seeking to boycott, divest, and bring sanction against the settler state, that one is somehow being anti-Semitic. This is completely false. It's a cowardly tactic of theirs, and I have myself absolutely nothing to do with it or them. So some of these people love marching because they can sell their far-left newspapers to others on the march. They can brandish their far-left group banners. They love marching from A to Z over and over again. Marching has its place, but boycott must never be underestimated as a weapon. There's no point in talking right now about the de-proscription of the resistance organizations, because as your question implied, there is no possibility whatever of successfully doing that. I'm actually right now wondering if there's going to be a police officer at the door of this studio to arrest me for speaking my truth, for saying what I believe about the current situation. And don't laugh, because that could happen and has happened to many people. The idea of that is belied by both of the main contenders for the British opposition leadership of the Conservative Party, are literally vying with each other as to who can kiss the feet of Netanyahu most passionately. One of them says that every British airport should have a Star of David next to the British flag at the border. That's what he said today. And the other leading contender said that people coming to Britain to live must pledge an oath of allegiance to Israel or be refused entry, residence, citizenship, and those who have recently arrived should be forced to pledge allegiance to Israel or be deported. Just imagine that. That's the climate in which we are currently in. Bram Hanekom is in Cape Town, one of my favorite cities in the world. Bram, what's on your mind?
Good evening, and George, thank you for the great work in solidarity. It's great to hear a fearless voice, you know, especially in the West, where, like you said, things are even harder for activists and people to stand up for the Palestinian people, and of course the people of Lebanon and oppressed peoples of the world. My concern, and I think maybe you could give some insight, George, is during the struggle for freedom in South Africa, our people adopted armed struggle as a necessary means to resist the oppression and the land grabs and the colonial special project of apartheid. Um, how does one explain and feed to the broader narrative that there's absolutely nothing wrong with an oppressed people raising arms to defend itself, that resistance is a human right, and it isn't an act of terrorism? And how does one expose against the Western narrative and the highly funded narrative of West is right type nonsense? How does one expose their terrorism? I think it's really quite sad to see how in Palestinian solidarity, one almost has to be apologetic because they're always accused of anti-Semitism, and the concept of advocating for the right to resist and the right of militant resistance is a human right, in fact. So I wanted to hear your input on that. Thank you so much for
Bran,
having
and
me, George.
thanks for that call. I was a part of your struggle, and apartheid was smashed between the hammer of armed resistance led by the African National Congress and MK, its military wing. It was smashed between that hammer and the anvil of international solidarity, a great national, international movement of solidarity was there through thick and thin. Even when the ANC, as they have since acknowledged, sometimes committed acts of military activity which were themselves terrorist. It is terrorism to punish innocent people for the crimes of guilty people. So it is terrorism to blow up shoppers in a mall, whoever does it, whenever they do it. There is a difference between resistance and terrorism. But because isolated acts like that did happen under Nelson Mandela's African National Congress, that does not render the noble struggle of the ANC and of Mandela himself as in any way plausibly be described as terrorism. So you are right. The right to bear arms against the illegal occupier of your land is a sacred and legal one. And if, thank God it never happened, if Hitler, when he was at the Channel ports in 1940, had succeeded in crossing the English Channel and had occupied the United Kingdom, all decent, respectable, patriotic people would have taken up arms against the invader, against the occupier. Some would have been out selling them financial services. You know who I mean. Kevin is in Edinburgh. Let's hear from him. Kevin, what's on your mind?
All right, George, how you doing, mate?
All good.
I'd
Thanks very much.
like to say that obviously I'm one of your fellow countrymen, but obviously you're no longer what I would class as Scottish. I would like to ask you one simple question that I've been kind of playing on my mind. I've been sitting listening quite intently to this for the last 15, 20 minutes, and it seems to be kind of Islamic propaganda. So I'd just like to ask you, why do you support an ideology that has destroyed mostly civilized nations? And I'm going to give you examples, i.e. Afghanistan, Iran, Egypt. These were all countries that were quite liberated from the 1940s onward until Islam took over and Sharia law took over. So that's my question to you, George.
Yeah, you're not as nice as you look, and people will get that joke. But you're also very stupid. First of all, you have no right or ability to decide whether or not I am Scottish. I'm afraid that right of excommunication doesn't extend to you in your squat. You don't have the power, the right to decide whether or not I am Scottish. Secondly, you seem to suppose that I support ideologies that you excoriate. I actually don't support the ideology of the Taliban in Afghanistan. If you weren't stupid, you would know that. If you weren't stupid, you would have researched my attitude to the Taliban and their fathers. even grandfathers, going back to the 1980s. If you were not stupid, you would know that it was me that told Margaret Thatcher that she had opened the gates to the barbarians and that a long, dark night would now descend upon the people of Afghanistan. And so it did. If you were not stupid, you would know that my hero is Gamal Abdel Nasser, whose Arab nationalist leadership of Egypt was the antithesis to the Islamist ideology that you, in your stupidity, imagine that I support. So do your homework a bit before you next come on the air with me. Take your knuckles, drag them across to your computer, and research the truth before you resort to slander. Ali Komapi.
Thank you for having me on the show. It's ironic that I get to speak after Kevin. My question was in and around what is the goal of Israel in the region? People have been talking about a complete regional conflict, a complete war in the Middle East between Israel and its proxies and Arab states in the Middle East. For some context, like I said, it's ironic that I get to speak after Kevin and after you responded to him in the 1967 war. Israel wanted territory of Palestine and some parts of Jordan as well, as you remember. And Egypt was one of the frontline states against Israel in the wars 1948 as well. So these Arab states were fighting Israel, and unfortunately they lost with of course, the help of the superpowers of the West. So in this particular instance, what do we see Israel's goal as? Because we know that there could be a broader regional war if Iran does, in essence, respond or retaliate. What would be the interest of Israel and her allies if this happens?
Yeah, their interest is to bring the United States fully into the war. That's the only way that Netanyahu can make a fact of his rhetoric today that Iran is going to be destroyed, that the Islamic Revolution is going to be undone, that the cranks and terrorists under the wing of the empire are going somehow to attain power in Tehran. The only way that can happen, because Netanyahu cannot make that happen, is if the Americans join the war. Even then, I don't believe that would be achieved, because if the Americans joined the war against Iran, I believe that Russia, at least, and maybe Russia and China, would enter the war on the side of Iran. So I don't believe that that goal can be achieved, but it's the only way that that goal could be achieved. The overarching purpose is to drive the opposition to the genocide in Palestine farther and farther away, to neuter, disarm, balkanize, break up the frontline states, suborn them, corrupt them into being pacific and being hostile to resistance. So they have achieved that in Egypt. They have achieved that in Jordan. They have not achieved that in Lebanon, which is why Lebanon is now the target. And the reality is they want to turn Lebanon into another Jordan, into another Egypt. In other words, a frontline state that is on its knees to them. I don't believe that that will be successfully achieved. Great question, though. Derej Yemeru is in Addis Ababa in Ethiopia. Derej, what's on your mind?
Okay. Good evening. How are you doing, George?
By the grace of God, good, thank you.
My question is, what do you think will the assassination of the Hezbollah movement leader Hassan Nasrallah will make the movement fracture or they use it as a strength? And what to expect next from the whole movement?
Well, look, there's not two Hassan Nasrallahs. So they haven't picked their new leader yet. They will do so in short order, I'm sure. And that leader, however competent, will not be Hassan Nasrallah. Hassan Nasrallah was a man of a century. He was a man of great wit, a man of great wisdom, a scholar, a philosopher, a military leader, and a national leader, and by that I mean the Arab nation as a whole. Even people of different sects and confessions in Islam, never mind in other faiths, respected Hassan Nasrallah because of his special qualities that could not be denied even by his worst enemies. So he will not be easily replaced. So the style of the new leader will be different. But by the grace of YouTube, the speeches of Hassan Nasrallah will live forever. The line of Hassan Nasrallah will never die, will never dim. It will be accessible to every generation that comes after us, remastered. Like the Beatles' Abbey Road, it will be remastered decade after decade. So it's not that Hassan Nasrallah has disappeared. His spirit is still there. His line is still present, and it will be faithfully followed by his supporters. And those supporters will grow. I always say, in the words of my leader, Che Guevara, what matters not is not that you die. Everybody dies. What matters is how you lived, how you die, for what you die, and crucially, how many people, when you fall, will come forward to pick up your microphone, to pick up your pen, to pick up your rifle. If that is the rubric, if that is the yardstick, then Israel is going to achieve nothing from the murder of Hassan Nasrallah, any more than they have achieved by the murder, assassination of the people that came before him in Lebanon, in Palestine, and in many other places. The struggle continues. La luta continua. The struggle of the Islamic nation, the Arab nation, will continue until Palestine is liberated. Let me squeeze in one last quick question from Zubair Rashid, solicitor in Birmingham. Zubair, very quickly, please.
Thank you, George. You are such an eloquent speaker. The likes of me, the commercial solicitor, spend time to hear you for time and again. My question is that Israel is up in his game because this war seems to be technology versus ideology. Why should not Arab countries or OIC support Palestine, who are of the same religion, ethnicity, cultural values? Why this seem to be Western versus Middle East war? So we should not.
The truth is, Barrister Saab, that the Arab rulers and the rulers of many other Muslim countries are belly dancing for the American empire, belly dancing for Netanyahu. Some of them openly with their normalization, and some of them behind a screen, some of them behind a veil, if I can continue the metaphor. But their people are boiling mad at what is happening in Gaza and now in Lebanon. Their people from Morocco all the way to Bahrain, from the Atlantic all the way to the Persian Gulf. Their people are overwhelmingly with Palestine, with Lebanon, against Netanyahu, against Israel. And one day the tables must turn, will turn, because I believe in the ultimate victory of the liberation movements of the Arab and Muslim worlds, who will triumph, because in the end, empires always fall, and the American empire will fall, and it will take down the settler, colonial, apartheid state they call Israel with it. I hope you've enjoyed watching as much as I have enjoyed presenting. Now that I know I'm not Scottish, I'll have to go looking for another nationality too that will accept me. If you've enjoyed the show, come back next week at the same time, same place. Maybe even try to be on the video wall. This has been Have It Out with Galloway.